Welcome to Job Tales. I'm Laura Leoncini, and this is the podcast where you listen to professional stories from all walks of life and find the job that suits you. Today we talk to Victor Dorribo, occupational physician and aeromedical examiner. If you want to know how you can specialize after your medical studies, stay tuned for the next 25 minutes. Victor Dorribo, you're occupational physician and aeromedical examiner. What a full title. Very exciting. It's funny also the way we met because it's a common friend who introduced us, and then I actually got to
Yes.
meet you before then during an aeromedical examination, which is amazing. So let's start from there. What do you do as an aeromedical examiner?
As an aeromedical examiner that I am since 2017, I receive in my consultation pilots that need to renew their medical license, so their medical certificate for class 1, meaning professional pilots, class 2, EASA that are private pilots, and also ATCOs, air traffic controllers.
Air
So
traffic
that's
control. Okay.
that's basically the most of the consultations are those three populations, and there is also cabin crew coming to see me for the same reasons, because all these people have high demands and environment. So all those people have high demands environments, and there are all legal requirements for them in terms of health.
Okay, so they must pass an exam every other, year or more.
Yes, the frequency depends of your age, but you're basically submitted to an initial examination and then a periodic examination.
What is it that you check on them?
Lots of things.
Can you say? Is it a
Yes,
secret?
no, it's no secret. That's the fun part of that, because it's really an open process. So, for example, for Europe, EASA, which is the European Agency for Aviation Safety, EASA makes what is called implementing rules. This is basically an European legislation that then needs to be applied in all the countries that ratified the European Convention. And then after the implementing rules, there are accepted means of compliance. And then there are lots of small requirements. So those texts are freely available, and you have to go by the book. There's no way to do an examination where that is not objective. So you need to, when you examine someone and you see something and this person has a condition, then it triggers something in the law that is okay. The condition and or the medication is compatible with the safe exercise of the license, or it is not. And if it's not, what are the conditions needed for this person to comply with the requirements? Or there are no ways to comply, and then this person is unfit for the use of a license. So that's basically the process. And we do a head-to-toe examination, so vision, hearing, a neurological examination, cardiovascular examination. When it's needed, we also do a laboratory check, sometimes research for psychoactive substances.
Of course, if you're high, you shouldn't be
Yeah, you
flying.
shouldn't.
Makes sense.
It makes sense. But there's no mystery in that.
So psychological examination as well?
Yeah, especially since you have heard about the Germanwings accident in the French Alps a few years ago that
Very
triggered.
unfortunate one.
Yeah. And that triggered lots of questioning about the way those examinations were conducted and the way information was exchanged between the AMEs and the authorities, and the way this circulation had to travel, not to travel, and what measures should be put in place in order to avoid another incident like this. Because after every incident, there's an implementation of new measures. You know that the same applies for, I don't know, for flight safety, in terms of cabin intrusion or flight deck intrusion. Someone
Yeah.
goes into a cabin with an axe, and so then there is an incident report, or where legislators decide, okay, so now it's forbidden to have access to the cockpit to everyone. We should have a door that doesn't open and is axe proof. So basically the same applies to medical examinations.
Yeah, okay. Well, also trying to get an axe through security might be a little bit difficult, especially you can't have like a bottle of water go through security when you. But anyways, I see the point, and
Mhm.
so coming back to your job, because it seems to be a very specific, like a specialization of what you do when from when you start as a general practitioner or a doctor, going, when if I think back of your studies in medicine, what was your background, and how did you grow from studying medicine into becoming an aeromedical examiner?
Actually, the aeromedical examiner part of my job is a small part, but to do these aeromedical examinations, you need a basic and advanced training in aviation medicine. So there are some institutions in Europe that provide this kind of training. You need to be a clinical examiner before, so general practitioner, or as I am, for example, an occupational physician. So you need to have experience with patients. And then you need to be familiarized with all the regulations that are in place for EASA and or for other countries. If you choose to be, for example, an FAA approved medical examiner, because that's my counterparts in the US or in Canada. They have local legislations that apply for their pilots. They're
Mm.
basically kind of the same, but then you have differences in the the processes that and the specifications and the kind of tests that you need to have in your office for sight, for hearing, and so on. People are
So
the
you can
same.
practice basically only in Europe with your specific training, or can you also in the US or other countries?
Now, basically, you can have a practice that is in all of Europe. And then you have sometimes like satellite doctors. I need to explain that. For
Hmm.
example, you have here in Switzerland, for example, or in other countries of Europe, you have, because if you think about commercial pilots, they fly a lot. And sometimes you need to have a license and a medical certificate that is valid, and you have what is referred to as an licensing authority. So in Switzerland, licensing authority is the FOCA, the Federal Office of Civil Aviation, and they are under EASA rules. But a few physicians are also allowed to perform FAA examinations, and that is useful, for example, for pilots that have long haul and that stay in Europe for a long time, or that fly under American airspace for a long time, and that need American compliant certificate. So we have those American compliant doctors that are based in Europe, and the opposite is also possible.
Okay, to finalize this in each region. So why the choice of
Ha!
aeromedical examiner? Do you love to fly?
I loved to fly
Used
because
to?
I used to fly. I used to fly. I wanted to when I was a kid. I wanted to be a doctor, a pilot, and a musician. So I think I basically scored one and a few percent of the others. Um, so doctor is checked. Musician, yeah, I kind of
Check.
use guitars from time to time, and I had a PPL license, so a private pilot license, a few years
Ah,
ago.
beautiful.
And my occupation, so my job was occupational medicine.
Hmm.
So testing for the medical fitness for people for certain occupations was my basic training. And then you have this really specific occupation that is being a pilot or being an air traffic controller. which is really, yeah, really demanding and
Mm-hmm.
really specific. And that also requires from people, not in terms of, yeah, because you always think about pilots or cabin crew in normal operating conditions. But what you have to think about is those people responding to an emergency. So an air depressurization in the cabin, a forced landing either on land or water. Those people have to be the first responders. They have to evacuate the plane in 90 seconds. They have to have good sight. They need to have good fitness. Sometimes they need to rely on their own, and you don't think about those persons or those cabin crew in those situations. You see them as the people that try to sell you the you think about cabin crew personnel as those people that try to sell you the duty free merchandising, but
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
have this huge background and training that they need to maintain, and they need to be in good shape for all those situations that we as passengers don't like.
Mm. I see. And so, because we're job tales, which were, people listen to podcast episodes about people about their professional stories, and so that they can find a job that suits them. What is it that you would recommend? Like, is it a good career to take from, having studied medicine? Because that's for sure. You need to study medicine to start anything in that career. Is it interesting? Is it demanding? Is it challenging what you do? And how would you recommend it?
It's interesting, but it's there are specialized centers that do that. Usually, you have doctors working in that are aeromedical examiners working for companies in their medical centers, like for example, Swiss, Lufthansa, other huge companies. But otherwise, it's mostly a small specialization that is part of your occupation. And so, what I would recommend, or something that I discovered, is that either you are employed by those companies and it's a 100% job, or it is part of your practice, which is my case actually. So, you need something else to rely on. Yeah, you need to have a specialization and then do this as a cherry on the cake, but
On
with all
your
the
on your job.
seriousness. Yeah,
Can you give me some examples of actually companies that hire you to do this 100%?
Lufthansa, Swiss,
So
Air
airliners,
France, airliners, they have their own, big
uh-huh.
airliners have their own medical service.
Okay, with examiners and all that.
Exactly.
Okay, okay. But I find that it is actually a nice cherry on the cake, and it enriches your basis as an occupational physician. Can you tell me a little bit more about that job? As an occupational physician, what do you do?
So this other job, what I do is actually you do consultations and consulting. If I can if I can summarize that. So in your consulting part, your company, you have employers that need to have their health risks assessed for the company. So, do my processes endanger my employees, either physically, psychologically, chemically? So you can accompany those companies with with their risk assessment. So in Switzerland, at least, it's mandated for some companies to have a health specialist, either a doctor or a physicist, or depending on the risk of the
Hmm.
processes. And that's for the consulting part. And then for the consultation part, you have like three major types of consultations. You have medical fitness consultations. So that's medical consultation where you see people. And as for the AME activity, so those persons have a demanding job. For example, firefighter, police people. You have drivers, professional drivers, people working within or at the side of railways. And so they need to have physical and psychological fitness for those occupations. So you test them. So that's for the medical fitness part. Then you have the medical follow-up of people that are exposed to specific risks. For example, people that remain exposed to chemical agents or to physical dangers such as radiation, noise, cold, and so on. And you need regular follow-up for those people in order to detect early manifestations of health effects of their job exposure. So basically, it's what we call a secondary prevention, because the better prevention is, of course, not exposing people. the, then comes all the means the employer puts in place in order to limit the exposure. That can be more frequent shifts, more protective equipment. That can be also, for example, for chemical substances, more ventilation, aspiration. So when all this is put in place, then comes and the exposure remains, then you have to check those people for early manifestations in order to take them away or put them into the medical circuit in order for them to get treatment and or compensation. And the third part, and the third kind of consultations we do as an occupational physician is the helping people stay at their work or go back to work. That is not as insurance doctor would do, for example, but it's more when people have long absences and functional limitations, such as not being able to lift weights or to work for a long time, and knowing the processes of the company and the requirements of the companies and of the jobs of those persons, to propose concrete yeah um, precise, not concrete like cement measures, but precise measures.
Precise measures.
Yeah, that can help the employer to put some measures in place in order to help those people come back to work and be as productive as possible, and to damage their health as few as possible.
I have this question for you. What are the soft skills required? The hard skills I can imagine, but please, mention a few in a short version, don't get too long. And then soft skills.
Okay, so basically the hard skills, you will learn toxicology, you will learn, for example, industrial processes, exposure sciences, you will learn management types, psychosocial risks, you will learn lots of things that are around your competence field. And then for the soft skills, what is needed as always is people skills, because in Switzerland at least, the employer contracts you for accompanying them and seeing their employees. So you need to manage a good contractual position with an employer, and you also need to be close to the employees. So being able to be close to those two forces is and knowing where to find yourself in the middle of that is really important. Also, what I always say to the employees is, okay, your employer pays us as an institution, for example, of occupational medicine, but the employer doesn't buy us, which is a really good, because sometimes, especially when you have to check for medical fitness, people say, yeah, but you found something, and I'm sure that my employer doesn't want old people or whatever, and I talked about my health problems, so now they told you that I need to be checked in order to be expelled or whatever discrimination process. But it's important to say, yeah, it's no, there's a process here. I'm not your enemy. Your employer pays me. He's not buying me. Let's be as objective as possible. And if there is something that we see, I'm not close to the employer. I'm not close to you. We need to manage that in the most objective way possible. So it's really difficult, I think, and you need really soft skills in that field. Open-mindedness, be really problem-solving oriented, and yeah, But it's fascinating in either way. So
Indeed, it is, Victor. Thank you so much for being part of my podcast, and I wish you all the best for the rest.
thank you for having me.
Keep listening to my podcast, and if you want to be my next guest, send me an email at jobtalespodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. And remember, it is Job Tales, type TALES. Ciao for now.